I don't got the answers, but we'll see if our guy Patrik No C Walker got the answers because I got questions, sir. Let's get into the scientific method with our guy Patrik No C Walker. Good morning, my good brother.
How goes it, King?
You sound much better today, bro. Oh man, I'm so glad you're feeling good, Pat.
Oh yeah, I'm solid. I'm solid now, man.
Boy, Pat.
It tried to take me off the game, but no, it's none of that.
Boy, you called in last week. It was like, hey man, we good to go. I said, oh Pat, nah, bro. I said, Pat, we can't do that to you, man.
I played through it.
You fought through it, bro.
Me on IR.
Yeah, they didn't keep you on
IR.
Not at all, bro. But good morning to you, man. Appreciate you for coming back through. I got lots of questions for you, Pat. We were just kind of joking a little bit about one particular one. But before we get into that, you just mentioned IR. Can you kind of give us a rundown on the Cowboys practice report?
Yeah, absolutely. Couple changes, one positive, one not so much. But we'll start with the three headliners technically. So Jonathan Hankins and Tyron Smith obviously both missed last week. Hankins, that was his second consecutive miss with the high ankle sprain, and he's working his way back. But, I like what I'm hearing from Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones, and they sound at least 51-49 as far as the odds are, as far as optimism is concerned. I am not so optimistic. If I were a betting man, and I'm not, but if I were, I would bet that Jonathan Hankins doesn't play in this game. And the reason I say that is because they feel, rightfully so, that they're trying to balance staving off a 3-game losing streak with not exacerbating an issue on your primary run stopper who's having a great season and you need him in the playoffs. So they're trying to, walk that line when it comes to Jonathan Hankins. And again, I like what I hear Jerry and Mike saying, but I don't necessarily see it happening. Now, if he does, it'll be a pleasant surprise to me. He's not been ruled out or anything. We'll see what today's injury report looks like. Also for Tyron Smith, a little bit more optimism when it comes to Tyron Smith, but not as far as the injury report itself goes, because he was DNP, which is did not participate both yesterday and the day before. So he's not started taking any team work. But I will also say, keep in mind, he's on, quote-unquote, the plan anyway, so he's not going to practice. So the injury report could be a little bit deceptive when it comes to Tyron Smith in that capacity. It does sound like the team has more optimism that Tyron will take the field. We spoke with Tyron earlier this week, and he said that he just needed the back to, quote-unquote, calm down, and he said it now has. He said it's not a stinger. It was just like back tightness, and they needed to work through it. And it sounds like it's mostly, if not completely, worked through. I have much more optimism on Tyron based on what he said and what McCarthy and some of the people around the building are saying. I would put Tyron at nothing too high. Let's just say 60-40. Maybe he plays. If it comes to Jonathan Hankins, I'm kind of like 40-60. But we'll see how that goes. Rico Dowdle, he was downgraded. He only had 2 touches, or I should say 2 handoffs last week against the Dolphins, 4 yards. I think that ankle is really starting to bother him. That's why they elevated Malik Davis twice in a row. So you'll probably see Malik Davis with his third and final elevation of the season coming up this weekend. I wonder if they just go ahead and make Rico inactive to make sure that he gets right for the playoffs. Stephon Gilmore suffered what he told us was a rib injury. I know some people thought it was an arm, but he said it was a rib injury. On Sunday night, he said he was fine. The next morning, that's basically what was echoed around the building. Stephon Gilmore is going to play against the Dolphins. And the others, you have Malik Hooker. He's progressing with his ankle injury. He went from limited to full. Hunter Lidke had a thigh issue, went from limited to full, also had a fumble issue. Hopefully that's going from limited to full. And then you got the transaction that lit the world on fire yesterday that
please.
I know you were talking about before I tapped in.
I mean,
the transaction of all transactions, apparently.
I think it's hilarious, man. We get into these civil wars. This is why Dallas is America's team. Nobody does this over a backup linebacker. But Rashaan Evans.
100% looked like, it looked like it was Captain America and Bucky versus Iron Man and Spider-Man. at the airport, right? It was like full-blown
Facts.
Black Panther going against Scarlet Witch. Like, I'm like, what is going on here?
Then
Okay,
out of
so
then
Rashaan
out of
Evans,
nowhere, Spider-Man comes in with
that's
breaking
what I'm
news.
saying, out of nowhere. Snatch the shield, and, all right, so linebacker Rashaan Evans was released/waived. He's subject to waivers. We'll find out by 3 p.m. today if any of the other 31 teams claimed him. If not, he'll be an unrestricted free agent. He can sign with whomever he wants, which also includes maybe tapping back into the Cowboys practice squad, although I don't know if that's going to happen. To replace his spot, they activated Matt Waletzko from IR with his shoulder injury. Now, here's where I am on this. Just go ahead and jump right into this. Here's where I am on this. I 100% understand, after seeing Chuma Edoga miss assignments on Bradley Chubb, of all people. I understand how that completely disrupted your offense, and that's a large reason as far as the pressure that Dak suffered, because it was almost 45% of his dropbacks he was pressured. That's you can't have that. So I understand why Waletzko is back. I get it, 100%. As far as why Rashaan Evans is the sacrificial lamb, I know some are pointing to his arrest for marijuana possession. I'm not subscribing to that. And I say that because I've seen other players suffer worse accusations and stick around. Now, could that have gone into the thought process, and maybe they had already made a decision that Evans was going to be gone, and that particular criminal allegation was like, okay, well, if he's going to have that as well, then
it doesn't help.
Super goodbye, right? But as far as an analyst's eye, was he as good as what they wanted him to be? No. Can they afford to cut into their linebacker depth, though? No.
Mm-hmm.
Did he flash at times and show that maybe with more reps that he could possibly at least be on the right trajectory? Yes. So I'm of the mindset that I don't understand why you would cut into the depth. I'm 100% on that. I don't get that. Like, I'm against that. I feel like there was, someone else that you could have pegged as the 53rd guy versus cutting into your linebacker depth, because right now you have Damone Clark. That's your only true linebacker on the active roster. And hold your horses. You got Buddy Johnson on the practice squad. All right. But unless Buddy Johnson is Bobby Wagner reincarnate, you're kind of in trouble with depth there. So I can't say that I necessarily co-sign the move, because I don't. I see why Waletzko was brought up, but as far as shipping Evans out, was he great? No. Was he terrible? No. So that in and of itself gives me enough reason to say, well, we need depth, and he's par or slightly above, and so keep him around. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't really know what the true reason was. I don't think it was the marijuana possession, because please spare me that. But yeah, so here we are, and the Civil War commenced. And on one side, ladies and gentlemen, you got everybody saying that this guy was Fred Warner,
right?
And on the other end, you got everybody saying this guy was Bobby Carpenter. So
it's like, why can't we have this healthy the conversation of, hey, he's neither, but we don't have the depth to take that risk.
That's exactly where I am. That's exactly where I am.
Yeah, man. So I mean,
no more, no less.
If you had to guess, Pat, do you think, because the Cowboys, I think they did this, I don't know if it was last year. I think one of the playoff years they signed somebody heading into the playoffs. But do you think they'll address it, though, heading in? I just have a hard time thinking you're going to go in here with literally one linebacker on the active roster. And if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if they were to call up Malik, they would then have to cut somebody else because he's out of call-ups, correct?
That is correct. You cannot call Malik Jefferson up again until the playoffs when the clock resets. So calling him up again does, send someone out the door, and then that brings you right back to this question. Well, why don't you send a linebacker out to bring up a linebacker to send someone else out for a linebacker? So kind of a weird situation. But to answer your question, I think that they are scanning the free agency market, but also practice squad players. And I can't mention which practice squad players I'm thinking about, because then I get hit with tampering. But there are a couple names out there that the Cowboys could look to poach, over the next couple of weeks before they get into the playoffs, in which case they won't be able to at all. Not for teams that are not in the race anyway. But Yeah, I know for a fact there are a couple that they have their eye on. But for me, you need to win these last two games.
Yeah.
If only for momentum purposes. You don't want to back into the playoffs. And to that point, still, I don't think that you could have afforded to cut into your linebacker depth. I think you definitely needed it against Detroit. And if you go back and you look at and kudos on the Cowboys defense for being greatly improved against the run, especially in the absence of Hankins. But if you go back and look at Buffalo, where they were wildly horrific against the run defense and James Cook, one of their only two good run defenders was Rashaan Evans. The other was DeMarcus Lawrence. Rashaan Evans only had 11 snaps against the run, but he had a couple of run stuffs, and so he was efficient when he was out there against the run. So that goes back to what I was saying as far as he showed flashes of being on the right trajectory, but apparently, they were just like, that's not gonna cut it. And he did a lot of special teams work as well.
Yeah.
I mean, 73% of his snaps were special teams, so that makes me wonder if Bones didn't stand on the table for him. And if Bones didn't stand on the table for him, then yeah.
Well, we've got a theory over here, and I don't even think it's that crazy, but Dallas obviously puts more premium into their guys. Meaning, were you drafted? Do we invest a lot into you money wise? Are you one of our guys? Yeah. If we're being honest, Rashaan Evans is not one of their guys. So,
no, 100%.
Yeah.
No, Marquise Bell is one of their guys. Mm-hmm. He's a drafted guy.
Well, let's
Clark, that's one of their guys. He's a drafted guy. Well, let's go, obviously, and I'm going to leave it here because I'm left to wonder if Let's Go isn't ready or if his 21-day practice window isn't approaching the end, because timing is everything as well. As we approach the end, past tense, the end of Let's Go's 21-day practice window, and a decision had to be made on him, what happens, 1 or 2 days before that that time marker comes due is you see Chuma Edoga basically just matadoring Bradley Chubb onto Dak Prescott. So I think it could have been just as simple as, let's stop overthinking. It could have been as simple as that put the Cowboys kind of in a panic mode to say, yeah, you know what, we cannot let Let's Go remain on IR with Chuma looking like this, because if Chuma does this in the playoffs, we're one and done. In the event Tyron can't play, and they're still trying to figure out when Tyron can get back, maybe as early as this week, maybe not. So too much flux there. I get it. The only thing I don't get is why you send a linebacker away for that. So, but that's where we are. Rashaan Evans, not Bobby Carpenter, but not Fred Warner, and we move.
Well, somebody else that's been doing some cutting down apparently down there, man. Mazi Smith. On your show, Cowboys Break, DallasCowboys.com, Brian had mentioned that Mazi was sub 300, and I believe he asked you what you thought Mazi Smith weighed prior to him giving his answer, and you mentioned, again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but this is what I was told, like 295, and
I said 290.
290. I mean, with no 290, just that's how he looks, which means it makes sense that he's kind of getting pushed around a bit playing nose tackle out there. But what happened? Like, what's going on? That's a lot of weight to lose, Pat.
Yeah, it's roughly 40 pounds difference from when they picked him out of Michigan. So here's my running theory, because Amber made an excellent point yesterday on the show, in that this cannot possibly be of any surprise to the Cowboys staff, because if it were, he would be fined every time he doesn't hit weight, right? So every time he steps on that scale and he's not at the weight they want him to be at, they would fine him every single time, but he's not been fined a single time. So then that leads me to go back to training camp, and in training camp, and you saw it yourself with your own two eyes, we were expecting Mazi Smith to come in and start challenging Jonathan Hankins for that one tech, right? But we saw, more often than not, we saw packages with them playing side by side, and Mazi was the 3. So we didn't think twice of it at that time, other than to say, oh, this is exciting. We might get Mazi on the field with Jonathan Hankins. This might be some great potential. Okay, well, fast forward, and now he weighs as much as a prototypical 3 tech, around 290 to 295. I mean, he's right there with Neville Gallimore, Oso Odigizua, Chauncey Golston. So it makes me wonder if the Cowboys this entire time so far had been kind of grooming him for more reps at 3 tech, because they saw how well Jonathan Hankins was playing at one tech. My only problem with that is you didn't guard against injury. And maybe you thought Carl Davis was guarding against injury by signing him in late November. He goes out there. He did not play well at all. So let's not even talk about Carl Davis. So absent Hankins, now you have a 290, 295 Mazi versus a 330 Mazi. That's not a 0 or a 1. That's too much mass that's been given up. So now as we have this conversation, really he's a 2 or a 3 tech. And that can be problematic for when you need him to be that big body nose tackle, but he doesn't have the big body. Now the strength is still there, but the weight is not there. He's not eating up double teams like Jonathan Hankins or that he would have at 330. So,
and Pat, I question if that was their thought process, right? Then you don't take a guy who wasn't traditionally a 3 tech at Michigan to then make him lose all that weight to play 3 tech when you have multiple 3 techs like Keanu Benton and Brian Breesy on the board that you can take that play that position better than Mazi. So I am just so confused at how losing, if they really did say, hey, we need you to do this for moving forward purposes, why would you do that when there's others on the board, number one? And number two, I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, he's never going to be a better 3 tech than Osa. Like Osa is that guy for you. So it's just really confusing.
Yeah, no. Osa is no better way to put it. This is not saying he's Aaron Donald, but Osa is your Aaron Donald when it comes to what he can do from inside the defensive line. But I mean, when it comes to Mazi, I think and I harken back to, I mentioned on the show as well, Tyrone Crawford, right? During the Tyrone Crawford era, they pop him inside and they make him bulk up, and then they slide him outside and they make him slim down, and they did that several times. And hopefully this isn't the situation with Mazi, but again, maybe they figured, because I think the signs were there as well. Maybe we didn't necessarily put too much stock into it, but when you hear Dan Quinn say things like, and Mike McCarthy and Will McClay say things like, we want to unlock Mazi's pass rush ability. We don't believe Michigan gave the rush the passer. And then you also saw things like they were tweaking his stance, which negatively impacted his get off as he tries to kind of acclimate to that. But you're tweaking the stance. You mentioned that you want to unlock his pass rush ability, and now he's down 40 pounds. Doesn't that sound like he's being groomed for a 3? So we'll see what year 2 looks like, but I think year 1 is what it is. At this point, it is what it is. He's roughly 290, 295, and he's not going to gain 40 pounds in the next 2 weeks. That's not going to happen. So this is what Mazi is. Hopefully that situation kind of works out well over the course of the next several weeks. And I'll say several because I don't want it to just be like 3 weeks. So outside of that, for Mazi Smith, look for year 2. It'll be interesting because Hankins was a 1-year re-up. Let's see how they approach Hankins in the offseason if he's back on a 1-year, 2-year. And I think that's going to, force their hand on Mazi to say, okay, well, we really need you to be that definitive big body run stopper. So go ahead and put that 40 back on. It's an interesting situation, but it's still question marks. We don't really have the answers. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
I want to sit here and talk more, but I know you got to get going here soon. But can you give us a preview? It is Thursday, y'all. So you know what that means on .com for Pat and O.C. Walker.
Yeah.
Can you give us a preview of the Science Lab?
Yeah, real quick. Cowboys, DallasCowboys.com. Check out the mothership. Should be dropping at 10 a.m. Central Time, no later than 11 a.m. Central Time. And I break down the importance of the Cowboys winning these last 2 games. There's several reasons why they should, but there's one most prevalent, and it has nothing to do with playoff seeding. Playoff seeding is on the table, but that is not why that is one reason I want the Cowboys to win out. Hopefully the Eagles lose, but that's not my number one priority as to why. It's because they cannot afford to back into the playoffs, and there's a situation or two that I cite as an example as to what happens when you back into the playoffs versus when you don't back into the playoffs after having a tough stretch in November, December. So anyway, check it out. It's a good breakdown. Hope you guys enjoy it, and let it lead you into Saturday against the Lions.
My guy, Patrik O.C. Walker, appreciate you joining us, bro. I'm glad you're feeling better, and we'll wrap next week, man.
Absolutely, brother. Talk to you soon.
Man. That's Patrik O.C. Walker. Very interesting conversation there on both fronts of the Rashaan Evans and Mazi Smith situation. Thanks for watching, and make sure to follow and subscribe to A to Z Dallas so you don't miss an episode of The Scientific Method. Every Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Central on Facebook and YouTube, with every episode available on A to Z Sports.com.